Welcome to Simply Speaking, a podcast series where we try to speak about complex topics in simple words. I'm Victoria and I am a master's degree student in public communications.
Hello, I'm Mudde. Previously, I graduated from international relations. After that, I started my master's degree in European studies. Right now, I'm doing my second master's degree in diplomacy and international relations.
And we start with a little disclaimer. We are not scientists or scholars, but we are just rather enthusiastic minds who like to study and learn about things that can change our lives. So sometimes our opinion might be wrong or biased, but we are still open to criticism and we would be happy to answer any of your questions or comments if you have them.
We are also not native English speakers, so sometimes, or for sure, there will be some grammatical or lexical mistakes, but we are learning and improving every day. So today we are talking about a topic that has been shaping political landscapes worldwide, called populism.
We'll provide some theory and cases so it would be easier for you and for us to understand what populism is in simple words. So Mudde, what is populism? How would you define it?
I would define populism in a really simple way, using one part of the population against another one, and the rhetoric can be changed regarding the needs of government. It can be immigration, it can be xenophobia, religious points, or anti-LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm. And when I was preparing for this podcast, I found out that in 2017, Cambridge Dictionary named populism a word of the year. And this same Cambridge Dictionary defines it as political ideas and activities that are intended to get support of ordinary people by giving these people what they actually want. Also in the same year, Human Rights Watch, it's the name of international non-governmental organization that works with advocacy on human rights, published their report under the name The Dangerous Rise of Populism, Global Attacks on Human Rights Values. And in this report, they were looking at how populists treat human rights as an obstacle to the conception of, so to say, majority will. So, for example, some minority rights can be not accepted by the majority. So in some countries, for example, they want to ban mosques, but it is not allowed by current system because it's religious freedom and it what protects religious minorities, but still the majority doesn't want it to exist. So it was the example of Mudde, who is one of the main researchers of populism as a phenomenon. We'll later speak of him more. Also, populism is a bit challenging to define, but in general, it is constantly, as a concept, being evolved, and it can be looked differently from different historical and cultural perspectives. It can be viewed as a political phenomenon and can take on various forms, from right-wing populism and left-wing populism, as well as it can be centrist. But the fact that politicians uses a populist strategy does not define them. Their dominant ideology, like socialistic or authoritarian, for example, can still be the main, but they just use populistic strategy to get into the government. Like in the example with Hungary.
Yes, of course, Hungary is one of the actually popular example in populism because its prime minister, Viktor Orban, represents the voice of Hungarian nation as a majority, and he basically doesn't approve the European bureaucracy seeking to build Brussels empire into their nation. That's how he defines the European Union.
Yeah, so he sees basically European Union as this system or elites versus Hungarian people as nation. So he's actually having this anti-elite and nationalistic rhetoric, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so as we see, populism is, as a notion or concept, is quite controversial, fluid, and can depend on different cultures and contexts. Speaking of origin, since my bachelor's degree is in philology, so I looked into the etymology of the word populism. So populism comes from Latin word populus, which means the people, And this word-forming element, ism, usually implies to practice or system or doctrine. So coming from this, we can say that populists, they use practices to refer to the people. They also usually viewed as the only ones to know and understand people's opinion, and the only ones who can stand up for the needs of the people. So the people are placed in a position to other, and those others being usually at the top. Therefore, the true populist leader claims to represent the unified will of the people. He stands in the opposition to an enemy, which is usually the current governmental system, and also sometimes includes media, and both of them usually portrayed as being corrupted or having lost all the connections to the people. Usually when I say the people, I mean it in, in quotation marks. Yes, so we can clearly see that there is a rigid polarization of we, the people, versus they, the corrupted elite, in populistic rhetoric. Also, while preparing to this podcast, I looked into who researches the populism, and we already mentioned this person. His name is Mudde. He's the author of the book named Populism, a very short introduction, and we would recommend it for you to read if you are interested in these topics. So Mudde sees populism as an ideology that considers society to be separated into homogeneous, which is basically the group that shares the same interests and values, and antagonistic groups, which are the pure people and the corrupted elite, that argues that politics should be an expression of general will of the people. So for this definition, it is the moral that distinguishes two groups, poorly minded and corrupted minded. So policies that populists also implement, as defined by Mudde, is that they try to strengthen the executive, which is usually the president or the government, and undermine the independence and power of judiciary and media. And again, the best example is Hungary, what's happening there. Also, Mijo, do you know any, advices of how to define or spot populists?
Actually, when we look at the populist examples, we see some certain points that are common in those countries. The first one, I would say, populists focus on people's fears and insecurities, and they mostly uses the negative stories to gain support from the society. And as an example, we see most of the time immigrants, we see most of the time religious groups and LGBTQ community as well as a threat of their society. And I think as a second part, we can also define complex social issues because they have tendency to use by the populist leaders.
And they usually simplify, right? And usually highly emotionalized.
Yeah, like we see really serious complex issues in a simply defined by the society, and no one think about what is the real cause of it, what is the real reason why it is happening. They just see it from really superficial way, and they just define who is good or who is bad, and they act regarding to it. Also, there's another important point that we see most of the times in those countries, strong charismatic leaders. And those leaders also supported by the silent majority or silent society who shows the way and who leads the society to reach some goals. And those goals mostly to achieve some narratives at the end. It can be nationalism, it can be some strong religious, it can be some far-right ideas, etc.
And a leader usually talks about ordinary people in a very romanticized way, using adjectives such as hardworking or tax-paying to sort of romanticize the mass and making it as noble. And regarding elite, they usually place it in a very bad lighting and usually referring to it as to be evil. And another point I would add is that they view people to be those who need to take all the fate of the country into their own hands and shake off the domination by these evil elites. And in such a way, they try to mobilize these huge masses to fight these elites and dominant ideas. So I hope we defined everything we know about populism in a really clear manner and simple words. So now we'll continue with examples, which we chose to be Turkey and Ukraine, and we'll provide you with some instances of populism in these two countries.
To start with the Turkey, actually Turkey is one of the, let's say, good example in populism because we see the leader almost more than 20 years in power. But when we look at the history and when we look at when it exactly started, we see Erdogan, we see the leader really neutral. He was trying to gather different parts of the society in one table, and he had tendency to communicate with different parts, but after 2 terms of his presidency or his prime minister times, everything changed. He started using different narratives, which is nationalism just after the terror attacks happening in the eastern border of Turkey, and that period actually went around 8 years or 10 years, which is equal another 2 terms of his power. After that, we see, especially in the last, let's say, 5 years, we see strong religious Sunni Islam and nationalism altogether. Why? Because we see really fast changing in Arab countries, which are also Muslim, and Turkey or Recep Tayyip Erdogan as a leader, he tries to keep the connection alive from the Ottoman Empire historical perspective. So that's why he tries to not only be a nationalist, but also wants to be a leader in the region, not only in Turkey, but in the whole Muslim world. And it can even define not only in Middle East, it can go further in Asia to Central Asia, even Philippines and other countries that are ruled by strong Muslim ideas and Muslim values. But why we can define Turkey, or we can define Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan as a populist leader? Because first of all, we see him as a really charismatic leader by the society, Turkish society. Somehow he managed to get vote from really rural places, which the people from that not used to vote, but he managed the society to go and vote for him.
Mobilize the people.
Exactly, right? Like what he does, the perfect is mobilizing the society in his way, and he's also changing his narrative almost, let's say, 2 terms. First, he started with being neutral after he became a nationalist leader because of what's going on in the region, because Turkey is geographically in the middle of the wars. We see in the north Ukraine what's happening, we see in the eastern part Karabakh, Armenia, problems with Azerbaijan. When we look at the south part, we have civil war for decades in Syria, we have Iraq, and when we look at the western part, we have Serbia, Kosovo issue. So he used that international landscape, that international tensions into nationalist perspective. But when somehow, like in Syrian civil war, somehow get less effective or get less, let's say, brutal, he changed his narrative into more religious one, because in this way he can also use that Arab words or that Muslim community in his political perspectives. So this is also one of the good example why Recep Tayyip Erdogan, we can call him as a populist. Another important point is he uses really simplified narratives, really simplified problems. And when he talks like he doesn't have any connection with that problem. He talks like he doesn't decide about the policies. He doesn't decide about the international politics. He doesn't define about economy or everything. He just keeps blaming someone else but himself or but his politicians. So that's why he is simplifying the problems and not taking any responsibilities from them. And if we go even further back, when we see him in a first political steps, he was chosen as a mayor of Istanbul, which is really important for Turkey's politics because we even have we quote that if you take Istanbul, you will take Turkey, because it is that important. Istanbul represents all the population of Turkey. In Istanbul has lots of population, lots of different culture from all over the world or all over the country. But main problem is somehow when he was a mayor, he learned how to mobilize the society, how to manipulate them, and how to mobilize into political landscape rather than only staying in social one. After that, he gathered different parts in one table, and he used the society which is closer to him to stay in power. He also uses lots of historical backgrounds, lots of historical rhetorics used by the previous governments. For example, one of the biggest example is hijab, the way of how women, wearing their clothes. Basically, it's too personal, too individual, but he's still using that narrative because of historical realities. If we go back 50 years ago or something, Turkey had a government that doesn't approve or banned hijab in official areas, official Turkish buildings, etc. They were not even allowed to enter any official building with their hijab. They were required or they were asked to take off their hijab and enter, do what they want. So he used that narrative, he used that reality to get voted because all he was doing is talking about freedom. Like, we will be free, women will be free, like women will wear what they want, exactly. So we can basically say that he mobilized that society into his political narrative and got the vote and got the majority, and he's still in power by using those narratives and voters. So, as a result, today we see he is combining nationalism and Sunni Islam all together to stay in power. He uses nationalism by using the terrorism in the region, and he uses the Sunni Islam by using the historical facts, what's happened in Turkey and previous governments, and he says that, if you lose me, you will lose again those rights, and it will be same again as it was before.
So this helps him to stay in power for how many years?
As a head of state, I would say around 20 years. Mm-hmm. But if you count also the mayor of Istanbul, let's say 25, more than 25 years, he's in a really good position in Turkey.
So for most of your life, he was a president of Turkey?
Yeah, actually, I'm 25 years old right now. I have never experienced another government in my country.
Well, for me, it was a bit different since I lived through the presidency of 5 presidents. And I'd like to speak right now about the presidential campaign of current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. I read a few research papers, and I'd like to speak about my own experience, having been during the election times in Ukraine. So I will speak on presidential campaign of 2019 of Volodymyr Zelensky. It is considered populistic because of his rhetoric and in general his figure met many criteria of what populism is according to different researchers. For example, Rubinstein and Omland research in 2019. Volodymyr Zelensky came to power as a man of people, or the one who serves people, so to say, because his political campaign and political party was called Servant of the People. And he's viewed as the voice of ordinary people who hated corruption, which was an elite or oligarchic government. He also used anti-elite rhetoric to mobilize the electorate, and it was quite successful because more than 73% of voters, the whole south, east, and most of the central and western regions voted for him, which is kind of rare for Ukraine because Ukrainian political landscape is quite polarized. So Volodymyr Zelensky's political campaign was a bit unusual because previously he didn't have any experience in politics. He was widely known in Ukraine as an actor or comedian. and his television activity as a showman played a significant role in his success in these presidential elections. He had a studio, 95th Quartal, which was specializing in political satire, and in 2015, just after the Euromaidan, which was the revolution in Ukraine, a revolution of dignity, that caused the impeachment of previous president, they made a TV series called The Servant of the People, and Zelensky played the main role there. In this series, he played a role of a history teacher whose name was Vasyl Holoborodko. And this teacher unexpectedly wins the presidential elections in Ukraine after a viral video of him swearing and furiously criticizing the government and the corruption existing in Ukraine becomes very popular. So after becoming a president, this character, Vasyl, he decides to step into the government and get rid of all the corruption and oligarchy that exists. So during the events developing in the TV series, we see how he works on eradication of the corruption of oligarchs in the government. He establishes how he tries to establish the peace in Donbass, and it is shown as simpler as comparing to how it is in real life, how it is to deal with these problems in real life. So therefore, in this series, we see an image of Vasyl Holoborodko embodied by Volodymyr Zelensky as simple, honest, and person with principles, sort of one of us kind of person who has become a president and actually tries to fight everything that people consider corrupt. And in fact, it all makes Holoborodko as a populist ideal who represents the interests of people opposing the interests of corrupted officials. This TV series ran for 3 seasons from 2015, and the 3rd season actually was released right before the first round of the 2019 elections. So it might be considered as a part of political campaign. Moreover, the series became one of the most successful products of the entire history of Ukraine's TV products, and 20 million Ukrainians watched the series during the entire time it was shown. To boost this association of the TV series, Servant of the People, with the actual people, Zelensky would later mirror his character's rise to political power and make the mass audience expect the miracles that the character Vasyl Holoborodko did from Zelensky. So those miracles that his TV character promised, they expected from Zelensky. He was usually also shown as a true representative and defender of people's interests, just like Vasyl Holoborodko did, and there was also created an actual party that held the same name as the TV series and eventually called Servant of the People. And in January 2019, this party nominated Volodymyr Zelensky as a candidate for presidency of Ukraine, although he was formally listed as a non-party candidate, but his name is actually associated with this party. Also, the name of the TV series and the party needs to be pointed out because it's clearly highly populistic, Servant of the People, which directly correlates with the idea of populism. Moreover, the screen capture from the film Servant of the People illustrated the candidates' program on Zelensky's website. And they also used as a presidential and parliamentary campaigns mottos, let's do them together, meaning the need for mobilization of the people against the ruling elite. Also, they used mottos like let's reset the power or let's reboot the system to emphasize the importance of the fight against oligarchs and corruption. Another interesting example of this TV series and film being connected to Zelensky's presidential campaign is that immediately when his victory was announced, that he won the presidency elections, Zelensky walked onto the stage at his campaign headquarters with the show's The Servant of the People theme on the background. So it again stimulated the people's ideas that they chose Vasyl Holoborodko, not Zelensky's, to sort of rules the country. But it didn't stop there. Also, there was, after his inauguration, Volodymyr Zelensky announced the dissolution of Verkhovna Rada, which is a Ukrainian parliament, and he started the early parliamentary elections. And Servant of the People Party became the first one in political history of Ukraine that was able to establish the mono-coalition in the parliament. And it all comes from this TV series campaign. Moreover, in 2019, Kyiv International Institute of Sociology published a poll where respondents were asked one question: what are the reasons for Zelensky's support? And the main reason they chose was that he is a person from outside the current corrupted system and that he is a new face in politics. 54% of people voted for that reason, which is more than half. So, Volodymyr Zelensky, as a charismatic leader of the party that already contains a populistic message in their name, Servant of the People, used a TV-made image of an ordinary man, Vasyl Holoborodko, that helped him to mobilize the people to vote for him as a representative of the will of people to fight a corrupted elite. So let's summarize. What is the populism? According to Kasmut, populism is an ideology.
It separates society into two groups. One is the pure people and the other one is corrupted elite.
And that corrupted elite, it argues that politics should be an expression of the general will of the people. Populists usually have a charismatic leader,
simplified problems,
mobilization of the people,
representation of the voice of the people,
and they call for fighting against the corrupted elite. Thank you for being with us.
We hope that we help you to understand populism in a really simple manner. Thank you so much.
There was Victoria and Mudde with you here on a Simply Speaking podcast that explains complex topics in a simple manner. Goodbye!